When I was working at that restaurant job, I mentioned that when I started, I would get about, on average, 3 to 4 shifts every week. And initially, they were always 8 hours, which meant I'd get at least, 20 something, possibly 30 hours a week. Then when they raised the wages, they cut the hours to where the longest shift I could get on average would be about 5.5 hours. So you'd get about 3 hours or 2.5 just taken out. And when there were days where people wouldn't show up and they called themselves being down bad, they would ask me, "Hey, can you stay longer?" And like 9 times out of 10, I would stay. And I only started to stop doing that when they started showing me their more like crazier tendencies. Because the idea behind staying, right, like when you could leave, is that, oh, you're gonna make more money, right? But I mentioned before that they had this one day where they told me to stay longer, and I ended up being there for so long I cut into overtime, and one of the managers retaliated by deleting me off the schedule for a day later in the week. So basically, whatever was made that night was mitigated by the deletion of me from a later day in the week. And I felt really betrayed by that because, again, I was only supposed to be there for about 4 or 5 hours. I stayed longer to assist them, and then you're punished for staying longer by having your hours cut for another day. That didn't make any sense to me. So after that, I just mainly stopped being willing to stay when they, supposedly needed me or wanted me to be there longer. Because I said there's no point in, working past the time that they give you if they can always just retaliate by deleting you from a later day in the schedule. What I thought was so interesting about that whole period of working there and, having all these shifts where you would stay longer is that it basically turns coworkers into enemies. Like, all of us, with the exception of the managers, are part-time employees. We're all getting about, I'd say on average, 15 hours. This is before they started cutting the hours even further, where people were getting one shift a week and all other goofy crap. But what I thought was interesting is that you get, again, on average, a number of hours that is closer to 0 than 40. And the only way to possibly get more is to just have your coworkers not come in. Oh, this other person called out sick. We need you for the rest of tonight. Oh, this other person, their car broke down. We need you to fill in for them. And I thought that was so interesting because it's like, the whole part-time employee thing, I really despise, right? It's a cheap way to get out of paying people more money, to get out of giving them benefits. But it's so crazy and really demoralizing that an employee is benefited by the other employees just not either caring all that much about working or doing something else that they're not supposed to do. Like, ideally, if you're a manager or a business owner, you want the people working for you to come in on time at the times that they're supposed to come in. But if you're a coworker, if you're a regular employee, you're incentivized to hope that the people that you work with just don't show up. Just, oh, I don't feel good. Oh, I didn't feel like going to work today. And there's something so disgusting about the idea, because it's like, do I feel bad about, being glad that someone called out sick, or, oh, I got to pick up this person's shift because they can't come to work today or tomorrow or next week? No, because I needed the hours, as much money as possible. But it's really disturbing to kind of think about how these jobs starve you of hours, or they give you a number of hours that's like a lot of times not even like halfway to 40, right? That's why I said 15 is closer to 0 than 40. And the only chance you have to get something that would remotely resemble what a regular working person would get, in a non-rotten society where every damn job is part-time except managers, is to hope that the people you work with just don't show up. Like if I went to church tomorrow and said, I hope every single one of my coworkers, again, this is not me presently, but just back then, if I went to church and said, I hope every single coworker I have either gets fired or calls out sick or gets in some kind of situation where they can't show up to work for so many days that they have to terminate them, so I can get their hours, I can get called in every day to fill in for them. It's like, yeah, it is messed up to think about someone hoping that the people they work with don't do their jobs enough for them to benefit from, but it also like speaks to kind of how it's really more a matter of just starving people of the thing they're supposed to get from a job. Because I said before, the main purpose of working somewhere is to be able to take care of yourself. And we've discussed how, we always hear about raise the wages, but no one ever talks about, right, the underwork, just having someone as an employee somewhere that you can basically only use once or twice a week for a shift that normally isn't even 8 hours. But just think of how wild it is. So like, yeah, I hope all the people I work with just don't come to work so I can have more chances of picking up their hours and getting more money. Also, I feel like the fact that that's even a thing that happens at jobs like this, these restaurants and other food places, and anywhere else doing the part-time game, is that it kind of confirms what I've said before, which is that these employers, if they wanted to, could just hire, like, even if they didn't want to do the full-time employee thing, right? They could still hire somebody and have 1 or 2 people that do the same type of job for, let's say 30 hours a week, right? Like, I really don't understand what is advantageous about hiring, 4, 5, 6 people to all do the same thing once or twice a week, as opposed to just getting 2 or 1, but they would never do that, to do that same thing. Like the fact that you can come in and fill in for someone by doing the exact same thing as them confirms that yeah, they could theoretically hire less people and therefore give the few people that they have more hours. They just don't want to. Like, I know I said I was done talking about them, but that was just a thought I had of jobs hiring a bunch of people and barely using them, and then you can get more hours if someone else doesn't show up at all. And I really do sometimes think about, when you work somewhere for 18 months, I think it's pretty obvious you don't want to just get up and say, all right, to hell with this, I'm done. But I can't help but think about how you start working there, there's this wage increase, and then you're getting, less time to work there, but then they start having this period where people are like either quitting or just not showing up to work, so they keep asking you to stay longer, stay longer, stay longer. You're always willing to stay longer or even come in on days where you're not scheduled because you're trying to just survive, to just make some money, and your reward, your prize, the thing you get for all of that time that you did not owe them because it was never scheduled for you to work those days or those hours, is to have them cut you down to a single digit number of hours for the last 5 or 6 months that you're there. And like I said, I know how corporations are. I know that they don't care about anyone but themselves. But like I said, I'll never think it's normal for an employee to work, to perform to the degree that is satisfactory to their employer, and then suddenly they're getting the amount of times they get to come into work cut down to like almost nothing. And in spite of how often they would assist their job when they didn't need to or were not required to, this is what they receive in return. And sometimes I will say that I think employers, by virtue of just being obsessed with making money, and ignoring the human element, right, they do screw themselves. Because when you don't care about your employees, like to the degree of, hey, let me at least schedule this person for 3 or 4 days a week at the very least, even if these are all half shifts, at least they can get something out of this job. When you care so little about your employees, don't be surprised when they don't care about your job. You know, the guy who's only getting, 5 hours a week or whatever is like, all right, well, hell, whatever, who cares? And it's sad. This is not what jobs are supposed to be. This like push to try and squeeze a few hours a week out of working somewhere, and then you only can get more if the people you're working with just do not care to even show up, or it's all just again rotten